A very good evening and welcome along to the public forum tonight for Tuesday, the 14th of June, 2022, ready to go. Now, tonight is a recording of the public forum. So I'd just like to welcome, if I could, all the other members of the public, and also I'll welcome our speakers in the gallery here today, and advise those in attendance that this public forum is being recorded and that this public forum is being audio recorded for administrative purposes. By speaking at the public forum, you agree to being recorded. Please ensure that if and when you are speaking at this public forum, that you are respectful to other people and use appropriate language. Aubrey City accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made during the course of this public forum. I'd also like to note that the public forum will be held in accordance with Section 4 of the Code of Meeting Practice for councillors, staff and delegates. I'd like to remind these speakers of their code of conduct under the meeting practice, and also speakers must limit their presentations to 5 minutes to present on their position. Councillors may take the opportunity after the speaker to presentation to ask any questions if they choose, and I'd also like to now outline our speakers for tonight. Before we go forward to that, though, I'd like to just ask to the CEO for any conflicts of interest.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bowen. We've received one conflict of interest declaration from Councillor Glacken. The nature of the conflict is a non-pecuniary, less than significant. The brief description of the conflict is that one of the public forum speakers is her brother-in-law. The public forum is the reference, item 3.2, Draft Botanic Gardens Master Plan. The action that Councillor Glacken intends to take is to leave the public forum and not participate when the matter is presented in the public forum. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. I'd just like to say that there are no apologies for tonight, and we'll be having Mayor King via Zoom and also Councillor Glacken and also Councillor Cameron via Zoom. And Councillor Baker is at the last meeting of the Solstice for next week, and he is on his way. So he'll be a little bit later on, but he'll be here. So thank you for that. So PF3 for now speakers. First of all, I'd like to welcome our first speaker tonight from PF3 3.1, Mr. David Hunter from Habitat Planning, item 13.1, Development Application 10-2021.38247.1, 198 Lot Torrens Title Subdivision, 360 Kerr Road, Thurgoona, Lot 12 DP 1139652. And is speaking tonight in support of Council's preferred recommendation. Welcome, Mr. Hunter.
Thank you, councillors. Thanks again for having me. I'm really just here tonight. I don't intend to take up a lot of time, but I'm here tonight with Michael Walsh, a representative from Peter Bowen Homes. And we understand there's been some interest at a community and a council level. And we really just wanted to be here tonight to be able to talk to some of those things and also answer any questions that there might be from council. So a few quick comments on the proposal. You've got a very lengthy council report from the officers, which probably goes through most of the information that you need. But just as a background, the developer is developing the land immediately adjacent, which is Brooklyn Fields. They saw the opportunity for this site to create something very different to what they were creating next door. It's a fairly isolated parcel. It's next to the TSR, and there'd been quite a bit of interest for larger lot development in Thurgoona. So they saw this as a good opportunity to provide that outcome. It's at a density which is much greater than what the structure plan envisaged. So there could be a lot more lots out of this, but they've chosen not to do that, simply to provide that product, which they believe there's a good market for. It is a challenging site. The other main challenge for this one was access, and the access that was proposed in the structure plan actually had it further south and it was on the creek, which when we started looking at it made it very difficult about how that might work. The developer identified quite early in around 2019 when we started talking on this site that there was an opportunity to bring forward that link road and also shape that access road coming in from the south. So there's a recommendation around deferred commencement for that road to be developed and delivered by the developer, which we absolutely accept. And that's come about through a lot of consultation with council staff over the last few years. Just in relation to some of the comments that we received via staff today, and we've provided a response back to council just in the period of time that we've had to look at it today. There were a couple of points. One was around tree retention. So looking at the design that we have, we were able to confirm that the hollow bearing trees on 3 of the 4 lots, which was 622, 228 and 327, we could absolutely accept those under the current arrangement. And also there's paddock trees on 4 other lots, 312, 316, 335 and 408. I'm just having a look at the screen. I'm not sure whether you can make out. There's orange circles and green circles. The green circles are the ones that we've acknowledged we can accept. The orange ones are just in the shape of the lots and where they're placed under the current arrangement. We just didn't have time to really confirm where those would fit. They're not ideally located. There are larger lots, but they're not ideally located to retain. Whereas the other ones, either on a side boundary or on the rear, we could work. So that was the reason for our response and confirming that the majority of those trees we could accommodate. We've also been able to change, which we've now reflected on this plan for you, is that the reserve R3 goes into stage 4. That's purely around that stage was originally shown on the number of lots rather than a design outcome. So it's easy enough to move that around, and we've now shown that. The other side of it was the open space. So when we approached this from an open space perspective, it's a larger lot development. So the view was that the reliance on open space may be a little bit lower, noting, of course, that we still needed to provide open space and we still had to deliver something that was accessible and central. And that's the intention of providing R3 and then supplemented by the other basin reserves, which still have some passive opportunity, and then R1 in the south. One of the suggestions has been around 355 and 408 being combined into one reserve, which is one solution. Originally, it should be noted that we had originally had R3 in that location. It was moved because once our ecologists went to site and had a look at the trees that were there, they identified R3 as a better location for ecological values because there's a larger tree there and there's also some small gill guys that they suggested if we retained that, we'd have a better ecological benefit than retaining the trees further south, which the majority of those are paddock trees rather than remnants. So if we were to retain 355 and 408 as one lot, we think that at an urban design point of view, that's not a good outcome because it ends up with lots, a narrow section of land that runs in between lots. So we just felt that that wasn't the best outcome, which is why we hadn't agreed to creating that. And the short answer is we just haven't had time today to be able to provide a response back to that. And we just felt that wasn't the best chance. So just quickly, if the desire is that there needs to be more open space, we just haven't had time today to look at it. But we acknowledge the comment of council.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Do we have any questions at all for the councillors? Have a question? Thank you. Councillor Callaghan.
Thank you. And thank you. Just in regards to Reserve 3, the feedback from a community member was that a recreational park and facilities should be provided there. Are you looking at building a recreational park or space or facilities there, or it will just be left as open space?
There is opportunity to improve it. We don't have a landscape plan. I believe that's one of the conditions that we need to deliver that. But at this stage, I can't tell you exactly where, but it's a 4,000 square metre reserve, and that was certainly the intention to have both benefits.
Thank you.
Any other questions at all by any of the councillors? Anyone online at all? All good. Thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Hunter. So next up, we have item number PF 3.2, Mr. Charles Mitchell. I believe that Councillor Glacken is declaring a conflict of interest in this one, and so will remove herself from the process. Thank you. So, Mr. Charles Mitchell, item 3.3 of the draft Botanic Gardens Master Plan feedback form on public exhibition, and his support is to support an alternative recommendation. So, thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, councillors, CEO and staff. We built our house about 10 years ago, close to Botanical Gardens and within the vicinity of the flood mitigation channel. So I'd appreciate no reduction in the flood-free environment Aubrey Council has thankfully provided to myself and the community. Having lived in Lismore and experienced and assisted in the flood management and experienced several floods, I do not wish to see Aubrey residents face a similar situation. One should note, like Lismore, Aubrey is built on a floodplain, as the engineers would know. The current Botanical Gardens proposal is expanded to go beyond the fence border of the gardens with the scope to include the flood mitigation concrete channel, opening up the project to potential statutory flood planning obligations. The proposal to include the channel now gives rise to the consideration of flooding, and this requires, at the very least, extensive public consultation. The consultation documentation identified a future flood study, and this will be appreciated by the community. However, the public consultation was labelled Botanical Gardens, and the significance of flooding to the wider community was not front and centre. Any proposal like this one that has serious and widespread potential flooding ramifications for the community and property should clearly be presented to inform the community within the title of the consultation. I respectfully suggest the Botanical Gardens consultation should have restricted itself to the current fence boundaries of the site, as inclusion of the drainage system now gives rise to the planning obligations, development and consultation requirements. Whilst I am in favour of the environmental aim of improving sustainability through revegetation of our waterways, it should be weighed very carefully against the safety of the community when increased flooding is likely to occur. Aubrey's historic engineering flood mitigation solutions, the large concrete channel, has been an effective and tested solution that has provided the community with a reasonably flood-free environment, but nature can never be fully managed by man-made solutions, no matter what engineers will tell you. Revegetating the very efficient concrete flood and drainage channel will result in a new channel potentially being 3 times wider than the current width of the channel, just to maintain the current flood flows. Simple engineering calculations to estimate the new channel width and adjacent impacts to parking and traffic flows would show this to be significant. The welcome future flood hydraulic modelling that is understood to be underway should provide refined information to allow the community to be well informed during a subsequent extensive statutory and consultation process. Asking the community for feedback has been appreciated, but in the current form of the scope of the Botanical Gardens should be restricted to the fenced boundary with no endorsement of the rewilding of the creek at this point in time. The community has relied upon the relatively flood-free mitigation security provided by the current drainage system. The current capacity of the channel may be above engineering standards, but the community have relied upon this level of flood protection. At a minimum, the level of flood protection afforded the community should be maintained, even if it is at a higher engineering standard than that required. As climatic impacts and a relatively short historical flood record cannot be relied upon. Obviously, if the channel is insufficient to meet the engineering flood standards, upgrades should be implemented. Vegetation flood channels that are extremely difficult to maintain, and even if maintained, can become clogged during moderate to extreme events. Vegetation becomes dislodged and accumulates. The risk of blockages must be factored and mitigated. Afflux created by downstream restrictions gives rise to a backup of floodwater, which will lead to upstream overtopping of the channel and flooding to properties nearby and adjacent in low-lying areas within the vicinity of the channel. I suggest that council not reduce the current flood mitigation already relied upon by the community, as this will undoubtedly give rise to some properties potentially being unable to obtain flood insurance for their house or property that was afforded previously by this safety net of the channel. I respectfully suggest that the council amends its recommendations in the way it sees fit to continue to protect the environment, but also the safety of the community.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. We'll have to leave it at that. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Have any councillors got any questions? Councillor, I'll first go with Councillor Callaghan. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor King, and to the most relevant staff member. My question is, has the Bungamba Wather drain flooded in the vicinity of the Botanical Gardens? And that outlining area?
Yeah, Bowen. Only if there was a significant blockage or downpour at the time, but it'll only be localised like it is on along the system at any time. It caters well for obviously large storms, and any naturalisation or change would consider the whole system in a holistic review. So as the master plan outlines, a feasibility study and some options need to be further explored. The master plan is just a high level that's an objective of the master plan to naturalise that area. That could take a whole range of forms. Any options would be modelled through the whole system to ensure that any changes in one area didn't affect the whole network.
Thank you, Mr. Ferris. Happy with that. And another question, Councillor Edwards.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Bowen, to the most relevant member of staff. And just building on that comment, Mr. Ferris, can you just confirm that any changes to the creek will be subject to studies and advice by a qualified hydrologist and or hydrology engineers?
Through you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, that will be the case. That would be part of the feasibility study and the analysis of all those options available to make it a more attractive infrastructure than it currently is.
Thank you. Any other questions at all, Mr. Mitchell or any other staff? No, thank you, Mr. Mitchell, for your presentation. So with that being our final speaker, Councillor Glacken, you may come back into the meeting, and we'll now close the public forum. Thank you to our speakers and to those people as members of the gallery. And we close that meeting, the public forum, at 6:19 p.m. Now on to our council meeting. I'd just like to acknowledge once again to Mayor King via Zoom, and also to Councillor Cameron via Zoom, and also Councillor Glacken. Welcome aboard. And also, once again, Councillor Baker is on his way from a Solstice meeting. So there are no apologies. So first of all, I'd like to open with the affirmation and acknowledgement of country. Thank you. Thank you. We gather to represent the people of Aubrey who have entrusted us with this task. May our efforts be blessed with insight, wisdom, and common sense. May our personal values give us honesty and courage to serve our community effectively with respect for all. Now, the Acknowledgement of Country. We'd like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people as the traditional custodians of the land which we meet upon today, and pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging, for they hold the memories, culture, tradition, and hopes of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that contribute to our community. Item CM2, recording and webcasting of the meeting. This council meeting is being webcast and recorded. By speaking at the council meeting, you agree to being recorded and webcast. Please ensure that if and when you are speaking at the council meeting, that you are respectful to other people and use appropriate language. Aubrey City accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made during the course of this council meeting. An audio recording will be made for administrative purposes. Item CM3, conflict of interest declarations received by the chair and disclosure of political donations. Item 3.1, I'll hand it over to Mr. CEO.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bowen. Two conflict of interest declarations received from Councillor Edwards. First is a non-pecuniary less than significant conflict of interest. Councillor Edwards has a personal but not close friendship with the author of the biodiversity assessment relating to agenda item 13.1, development application 360 Kerr Road, Thaguna, and the action intended to take is to remain in the chamber when that matter is considered. The second declaration of interest from Councillor Edwards is non-pecuniary less than significant, relating to item 13.3, Draft Botanic Gardens Master Plan. The nature of the conflict is another team member at Councillor Edwards' workplace has provided advice on this item through Heritage New South Wales, and the action intended to be taken is to remain in the chamber. In terms of disclosure of political donations and requirements of the Environmental Planning Assessment Act, the Act under section 10.4 requires a person submitting planning applications or submissions regarding a planning application to disclose any reportable political donation and or gifts to any local councillor or employee of the council. Reportable political donation includes those of or above $1,000. The disclosure statement forms are available on Council's website and must be lodged in accordance with the Act. In dealing with development applications, councillors need to take into account specific planning matters contained in the Act. Accordingly, the provisions of 4.151 of that Act are set out in the Council Officer's report detailing planning issues to be considered. The Local Government Act 1993, Section 375A requires that a division be called whenever a motion for a planning decision is put at a meeting of the council. Planning decision means a decision made in the exercise of a function of council under the Act, including a decision relating to a development application, an environmental planning instrument, a development control plan, or a development contribution plan under that Act, but not including the making of an order under Division 9.3 of Part 9 of that Act. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. We'll now move on to item CM4, apologies. I have no apologies, although I have heard from Councillor Baker once again, who is on his way from the final Solstice meeting for next week. Item CM 4.2, attendance by councillors at the meeting via audio visual link, and they are Mayor King, Councillor Glacken and Councillor Cameron. Could I just ask for someone to move this motion? Councillor Bettridge.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Bowen, I'd like to move that Council receive, note and accept the attendance of Councillor King, Councillor Glacken and Councillor Cameron via audio-visual link Zoom for this meeting.
And Councillor Callaghan.
I'd like to second that motion. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move on to, would anyone like to speak? Would like to, we need to put that motion. My apologies. Would you like to speak to that motion? Or you're right to put the motion. Thank you. So we'll put that motion, if I may. All those for. Thank you, councillors. Motion is passed. Thank you. We'll now move on to item CM5, the mayoral minute. There is no mayoral minute. Item CM6, action plans. If we could have somebody move the action plans. Thanks. Thank you, Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bowen. I move the following action plans be received and noted. 1, actions complete for noting only. 2, actions awaiting response from external parties. 3, actions in progress. And 4, long-term issues more than 3 months.
I have a second of that motion. Thank you, Councillor Bettridge.
Second motion, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Would you like to speak to that motion, Councillor Thurley? No worries. So happy to put the motion. So all those in favour? Thank you, councillors. That motion is passed. We'll now move on to item CM7, confirmation of minutes of previous meetings. Item CM 7.1, minutes of the council meeting held on Monday, the 23rd of May, 2022 at 6:13 p.m. Could we have a mover for that? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Callaghan.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bowen. I'd like to move that the minutes of the council meeting held on Monday, the 23rd of May, 2022 at 6:13 p.m. be confirmed.
Thank you. And Councillor Thurley.
I second the motion, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Would you like to speak to that motion at all, Councillor Callaghan? Thank you very much. So we'll sum up, though. We'll put the motion then. So all those in favour? Thank you, councillors. And that motion is carried. Now move on to item CM8, reports from community forums. There are none. So then we'll move on to item CM9, notices of motion or notices of rescission. There are none. Item CM10, presentations and deputations. There are none of those. Item CM11, reports and minutes of committees and working parties. Item CM11.1, minutes of the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee held on the Wednesday, the 18th of May, 2022. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bowen. I move that council receives, notes and accept the minutes of the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee meeting held on Wednesday, 18 May 2022.
And can I have a seconder for that? Thanks. Thank you, Councillor Glacken.
Happy to second. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. Would you like to speak to that motion, Councillor Thurley?
Just to note, 2 things. One, actually, Ramjo approached the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee meeting and asked, would this ARIC provide such service to the Ramjo? 2 members of our Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee meeting have agreed to do that on a trial basis for the next meeting of Ramjo to see how this works.
Thank you. Any other questions on that at all? Happy for me to put the motion. Thank you. So all those in favour? Thank you, councillors. That motion is carried. Item CM 11.2, minutes of the Companion Animals Advisory Panel held on Wednesday, the 13th of April, 2022. Councillor Edwards.
I move that council receives, notes and accepts the minutes of the Companion Animals Advisory Panel meeting held on Wednesday, the 13th of April, 2022.
And Councillor Callaghan.
I'd like to second that. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bowen.
Thank you. Would you like to speak to that motion, Councillor Edwards?
No, thank you.
Okay, happy for me to put that motion, sum up? No worries. So we'll put that motion. All those in favour? Thank you, councillors. That motion is carried. Now we'll move on to item CM12, documents for sealing. Item CM 12.1, documents for sealing. If I could have a mover for this, thanks. Thank you, Councillor Bettridge.
Thank you. Through you, Deputy Mayor, I'd like to move the council authorises its seal to be affixed to the documents outlined below in the presence of two signatories authorised to affix a seal pursuant to Regulation 400 of the Local Government General Regulation 2005 and the council seal and management of legal documents and advice procedure. A, Aubrey City lease to Urunga Early Learning Centre Incorporated, 373 Woodstock Court, Aubrey, for 5 years, commencing on the 1st of November 2022, in brackets FIL 11/02087.
Thank you. And Councillor Thurley.
Second the motion, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Would you like to speak to that motion, Councillor Bettridge?
No, thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Happy for me to put that motion. Then we'll put that motion. Those in favour? Thank you. That motion is carried. Item CM13, Officers' Report for consideration. Item CM 13.1, Development Application 10.2021.38247.1, 198 Lot Torrens Title Subdivision, 360 Kerr Road, Thurgoona, in brackets, Lot 12, DP 1139 652, end of brackets. Councillor Edwards.
I'd like to move an alternative motion, Deputy Mayor Bowen.
Thank you. We'll just have that on the screen. Okay, away you go, Councillor Edwards.
Thank you. I move that Council A receives the contents of this report and B, grant consent to development application 10.2021.38274.1 for a 198 lot subdivision, tree removal and associated works on land described as Lot 12 in DP 1139652, situated at 360 Kerr Road, Thurgoona, Lot 4 in DP 1033551, situated at Kiwana Road, Willinga, Lot 101 in DP 1216660, situated at Tabletop Road, Thurgoona, and Kerr Road, Northern Reserve, unmade, subject to deferred commencement and the conditions contained in the draft determination included at attachment 5 to this report, with the addition of the following deferred commencement condition. Number 3, development application, deferred commencement pursuant to section 4.16 brackets 3 of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979. This is a deferred commencement consent. This development consent does not operate until such time as amended plans are submitted to council reflecting the following: retention of all trees on lots 228, 312, 321, 327 and 622, retention of identified trees on lots 335 and 408 in consultation with council staff, amalgamation of lots 335 and 408 into a single parcel to be designated as a public reserve and dedicated to council, or identification of other suitable parcel of land in stage 2, 3 or 4, which is at least 4,000 square metres in area and which is to be dedicated as public reserve, and amending the staging plan so that reserve R3 is provided as part of stage 4.
Thank you, Councillor Bettridge.
Happy to second that, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Edwards?
Yes, please, Deputy Mayor.
Fire away.
Firstly, I just would like to note that this development proposes that 5 Aboriginal sites are to be destroyed. And it's disappointing to see that no attempt has been made to preserve any of these sites. And I note that the cultural value of these sites in the subject area to local Aboriginal people has not been determined by the heritage assessment. But I'd like to focus tonight on the vegetation in the development. I'd also like to note that the proposed plans for the Sloane's Froglet woodland and basins are to be commended. However, the development as proposed does not adequately consider the direct and indirect impacts of biodiversity, particularly on the adjoining TSR. The development proposes to remove 10 paddock trees and 4 large hollow-bearing trees. This is not consistent with the Thurgoona Threatened Species Conservation Strategy 2004. The strategy, including assessed areas throughout Thurgoona, including the subject land, in terms of habitat condition, floristic rating and linkage significance. And recommendations for each of these areas were provided based on the condition and significance of the land. That report recommended that where possible, large hollow-bearing trees on the subject land should be retained. The development will retain approximately 36 large hollow-bearing trees and 10 other large native trees around the fringe of the subject site, which will be integrated into the overall design and layout. However, the development does not seem to have been designed to allow impacts to hollow-bearing trees or paddock trees in the main part of the development, where the residential lots lie. In fact, a single tree is proposed to remain, despite all of these trees providing habitat and important linkages to food and breeding areas for several threatened species between environmental land, the Bells TSR, and significant roadside vegetation. I also note that 0.15 hectares of vegetation will be disturbed in the environmental lands that is listed as threatened box scum woodland under the New South Wales Biodiversity Conservation Act and the Federal EPBC Act. In addition, the development doesn't have enough public open space. The Thurgoona-Willinga Precinct Structure Plan requires 2.2 hectares of open space on this site. This development proposes 1.64 hectares of Sloane's habitat and just 0.7 hectares of usable public open space. I note that this is a combined 2.35 hectares of open space, but Sloane's habitat is not public open space. You can't kick a footy around a wetland. So then this development proposes just 1/3 of the public open space it should have, falling well short of the needs of the community. The stage 6 open space in the centre of the development is included in the last stage. Residents should have access to landscape public open space as soon as possible, and they should not have to wait until the last stage of the development. However, I believe that the public open space and biodiversity issues can be addressed by this alternative motion, which retains all the hollow-bearing trees, retains all but 2 of the paddock trees, brings the currently proposed public open space forward to stage 4, and requires additional public open space. And I'm very pleased to hear that the developer now agrees. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaking for, Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I do speak in favour of this, but what I really want to note is the significant work done by the developer and our staff today to reach the stage we're at tonight, and I commend the developer and our staff for the hard work they've done. I note that in the presentation earlier, it was stated that we really haven't had enough time today to look at all these matters in great detail, but I'm confident in the willingness that you've shown today that we can achieve a great outcome here. So I'd like to vote in favour of this.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. Do we have any other questions? Or yes, we have a question online. Thank you to Mayor King.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bowen, and through you to the most relevant member of staff. In relation to public open space, there is a reference in the officer's report regarding local, pardon me, local regional parks and amenities that might be part of future planning within the Willinga-Thurgoona precinct. Could you give us some perspective of how close or connected this proposed subdivision would be to potential future parks, ovals or facilities, as that seems to be a point that's been raised throughout this whole debate in terms of accessibility to open spaces. So could you give me a bit of a perspective there, please?
Thank you, Mr. Christie.
Thank you for the question, and for you, Deputy Mayor Bowen as Chair, and thank you for the question. So there's a few parts to that question. So on this site itself, there is local recreational parks 4 and 7, which were the 2 identified, which are the major parks at the north and the southern end of the site, which Councillor Edwards indicate were approximately 2.4 hectares in area. They obviously also included potential for stormwater, so it wasn't necessary that those 2.4 hectares in totality was going to be pure open space, because in the structure plan they did indicate potential for stormwater basins to be co-located with those. So that's located on the site, as Mr. Hunter did indicate earlier. There's also an R1, which is a reserve one, which is around 4,000 square metres, in addition to R3, which also is around just under 4,000 square metres. Those provided within the site by the developer in addition to those local recreational parks. From the structure plan, there also was potential for some local recreational parks, being number 8 and number 6, number 21, which again are similar in size, approximately about 1 hectare in area. They are located just to the south of the creek that borders to the south of this site, as well as just on the eastern edge of the site. There was also local sports ground 3, which is also identified just to the south of this site, within several hundred metres of the site. Plus also, those are quite comfortable potential within walking distances once there's linkages. There's also other open space spread throughout, and there's the district sports ground located just to the south of this site as well, pretty much adjoining the northern edge of the Willinga Army Depot. That's also identified in the Thurgoona-Willinga precinct structure plan. So there's a variety of broad regional and recreational open spaces, in addition to the ones that are provided in here. Those recreational open spaces are as part of the review of the Thurgoona-Willinga precinct structure plan that'll be commencing very soon. There'll be some further detail. Yes, they are longer stay places, so they will likely have some forms of facilities, whether it's toilets, whether it's playground equipment, those types of scenarios, barbecue equipment, but they will be fleshed out, one, as part of the further review of the Thurgoona-Willinga precinct structure plan, but also as part of the review of the open space strategy, which has also been undertaken by Council over the coming 12 months. So hopefully that provides some context for the broader open space.
Thank you, Mr. Christie. Have you got a follow-up question, Mayor King?
No, thank you, Mr. Christie, through you, Mr. Bowen. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to note that Councillor Baker has now joined the council meeting. Welcome, Councillor Baker. Great to have you here. So any other speakers for or against, or any questions at all regarding this development? No. So that being the case, would you like to sum up would you like to sum up at all, Councillor Edwards?
Yes, please, Deputy Mayor. A vision for the future of Thurgoona and Willinga has been carefully developed with extensive consultation with the community. Consistent deviation from that vision has resulted in disconnected communities, fragmented habitat for already threatened species, a lack of schools, services, shops and infrastructure, and development with little open space, and suburbs that roast in summer because large old trees have been removed. I think this development, as conditioned, is a good outcome for future residents and our local biodiversity, and I look forward to supporting more developments that meet both these important outcomes.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. So now I'd like to put the motion as a division. So those four, if I may. Councillor or Mayor King, Councillor Glacken, Councillor Cameron, Councillor Thurley, Councillor Callaghan, Councillor Edwards, Councillor Bowen, Councillor Bettridge and Councillor Baker. Thank you very much, all four. And that motion is now carried. Thank you. Now, item CM 13.4, Local Government Remuneration Tribunal. My apologies. Thank you. Let's move on to item CM 13.2, options for biosolids transportation and reuse. Findings following the select tender process. If I could have a mover, Councillor Thurley, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bowen. I move that Council A, as per the Local Government General Regulation 2021 Clause 178, accepts no tenders for contract number 21/02513, transport and reuse of Aubrey City Council biosolids. B, cancels the proposal for the contract in accordance with Clause 178 3A of the Local Government General Regulation 2021. And C, explores alternative options for the beneficial reuse of biosolids, including initiatives outlined in this report.
Councillor Glacken.
Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. Councillor Thurley, would you like to speak to the motion?
I have a question first to the most relevant member of staff. I note the reasons for not proceeding with this tender, and they are quite clear, and I don't have any problem with that. One of the issues, though, is that our biosolids are very low solid content, very high moisture content, something like 85% water, and we have to transport that and move that around. I'm just wondering whether, I note the report says some options are being considered for dewatering, but I also note that at the now non-used Visi factory, there are two screw presses which are able to achieve at least 50% dryness of the sludge that used to come out of the biosolids that used to come out of that option. Have you thought about using or approaching Visi to see if you could run a trial using those two screw presses?
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. To you, Mr. Warlow.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Bowen. In answer to Councillor Thurley's question, no, we have not approached Visi at this stage to see whether or not we could trial their screw presses in order to further dewater council's biosolids.
Thank you. So, Councillor Thurley, would you like to speak to the motion
look,
now?
This is a really important issue. Our soils in Australia lack phosphorus and nitrogen, and the one thing that biosolids contain in abundance is phosphorus and nitrogen. And it seems a crazy thing to do for trace amounts of PFAS that we cannot use this stuff. And I think along with all the other stuff that's happening, we need to be having detailed and serious conversations with the EPA and unite with all other councils across New South Wales who probably face exactly the same issue, because it's ludicrous to continue to bury this stuff if there's another way to use it. And I don't believe that tiny traces of PFAS are sufficient to say, no, you must bury this stuff and it should never see the light of day.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. Any other questions or for and against? No? Would you like to sum up, Councillor Thurley? Happy for me to put the motion? So put the motion to those for. Thank you. That motion is passed. Item CM 13.3, the draft Botanic Gardens Master Plan, feedback from public exhibition. If I could have somebody move that motion. Thank you, Councillor Bettridge.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bowen. I'd like to move that Council A receive and note the comments received through public exhibition period for the draft Botanical Gardens Master Plan, and B, endorse the final version of the Botanical Gardens Park Master Plan concept drawing and accompany Botanical Gardens Master Plan document.
Thank you. And a seconder, Councillor Thurley.
Second the motion, Mayor, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Would you like to speak to that motion, Councillor Bettridge?
The comments through the public exhibition period were varied and interesting to read. I think it really reinforces the concept that botanical gardens as a piece of infrastructure in Aubrey is much loved, and we as a council are beholding to those people to proceed carefully and with a well thought out master plan to have positive outcomes for the community. I believe that the master plan concept that we have does that, and nothing will be undertaken without further planning and speaking to professionals about anything we're going to do. So I'm comfortable to move forward from this position. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bettridge. Speaking for that motion, Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I agree with Councillor Bettridge's statements there. This master plan is a huge plan which is looking at a horizon of 20 years. There have been lots of comments made about and we had a submission tonight about the Bungamera Creek. There's no doubt that before anything happens there's a lot more work to be done. Hydrology, other studies. It's not just a matter of make it all rocks and weeds. This can increase the liability of flooding with debris washed down getting caught in natural features. So we need to be careful, and I have no doubt that we will. There were some other comments made about why are we bothering about native species. They're all around us, we can see them. Yes, but most people probably don't know many of what they are. So to have proper examples signposted and their botanic history in the gardens, I think is a great move. The Elms Avenue is clearly one of the most emotional parts for the community. They are nearing the end of their life. Have a look at them now and you can see there are significant problems. Yes, it's an iconic avenue and we need to work to restore it and make it as good as it can be. I think the options given by our arborist and our consultant are the best we can get. And I look forward to a sensitive implementation of that part of the plan by council staff over the next few years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. Speaking for the motion, Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bowen. I'd also like to concur that I think it's a really well prepared and thought out plan. I also note, as did Councillor Thurley, that the Avenue of Elms, they're part of our history and there's a great attraction and good feeling about them from the community. But I think also we've got to move forward on this, and what was in the past can't always be in the same into the future in the gardens. And yeah, I just endorse the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Any other questions or for and against at all? No, happy for us to put the motion. Would you like to sum up that motion, Councillor Bettridge?
No, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Very comfortable with the comments from my fellow councillors and I look forward to a positive outcome.
Thank you, Councillor Bettridge. Okay, so we'll put the motion now. Those for? Thank you. That motion is carried. Now, item CM 13.4, Local Government Remuneration Tribunal 2022 Annual Report and Determination. Thank you, Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor King. I move that Council A receives and notes the report on councillor and mayoral fees for 2022-23. B, fixes the annual fee payable to each councillor at $25,306 for the 2022-2023 financial year, pursuant to Section 248 of the Local Government Act 1998, New South Wales, and in accordance with the Local Government Remuneration Tribunal's 2022 Annual Report and Determination. And C, fixes the annual fee payable to the Mayor in addition to the fee payable under Section 248 at $62,505 for the 2022-2023 financial year, pursuant to Section 249 of the Local Government Act 1993, New South Wales, and in accordance with the Local Government Remuneration Tribunal's 2022 Annual Report and Determination.
Thank you, Councillor Callaghan.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. I'd like to second that. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Thurley?
simply to note that in my 10 years on council, this recommendation comes from the Office of Local Government every year, and we have simply accepted that recommendation without discussion or debate.
Thank you. Any other questions at all, or for or against? Thank you. So happy for me to put the motion. Thank you. So those in favour? Thank you. That motion is carried. Now we move on to item CM 13.5, the annual Aubrey City Compliance Priorities Program 2022-2023. I have a mover for that. Thank you, Councillor Bettridge.
Deputy Mayor Bowen, I'd like to move that Council A adopts the draft annual Aubrey City Compliance Priorities Program 1st July 2022 to 30th of June 2023. B, places the Aubrey City Compliance Priorities Program 1st of July 2022 to 30th of June 2023 on the Aubrey City website.
And Councillor Thurley.
Second the motion, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Bettridge, would you like to speak to the motion?
Just very briefly, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Comfortable to adopt the Aubrey City Compliance Priorities Program for 22-23 and very comfortable to move forward with the 22-23 program. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on that item? Happy for me to put that motion, Councillor Bettridge. Thank you. So I'd like to put that motion. All those for? Seem to have lost Councillor Cameron on screen. That motion is carried. Thank you. There we are. Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Item CM 13.6, draft revised community strategic plan towards Aubrey 2050. Councillor Callaghan.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bowen. I would like to move an amended motion.
Thank you. We'll just wait for that motion to be on the screen.
Yep, and I'm ready.
Thank you. We have a.
Thank you. I'd like to move that Council A receives and notes the submissions received and community leaders forum feedback regarding the draft community strategic plan towards Aubrey 2050, and B, endorses the draft revised community strategic plan towards Aubrey 2050, including the following additional amendments. 1, inserting the words emissions reduction and in to the an enhanced natural environment theme. Description to read as our natural environment is protected and enhanced. We have adapted to the changing climate and continue to lead in emissions reductions and in natural resource and waste management. And 2, amending the section titled Our Community Said That They Value by 1, updating, learning more about the impacts relating to climate change, 2, learning about adapting to climate change and the importance of reducing emissions. And 2, updating, reducing our carbon footprint to read, reducing our carbon footprint to achieve net zero emissions. And 3, inserting a new strategic action under the an enhanced natural environment theme, 2.1.2. The community is empowered and supported to reach the community emissions reduction targets, in brackets, and remember the existing strategic actions, 2.1.2 and 2.1.3 as 2.1.3 and 2.1.4 retrospectively, close brackets. And 4, updating the enhanced natural environment performance measures by 1, inserting Aubrey City's carbon emission targets after the community carbon, targets after the community carbon emission targets. And 2, updating the measure Aubrey City consumes 100% renewable energy to specify by 2025. And 3, updating the measure increase total recycling on site and households to specify to 80% by 2030. 4, replacing the measure halve waste to the amount of organic waste sent to landfill with no organic materials to landfill by 2030. And 5, updating the measure Aubrey Waste Management Centre have an 80% average recovery rate from all waste streams to specify by 2030.
Thank you, Councillor Callaghan. Do we have a seconder for that? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Bettridge.
Second, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bettridge. Councillor Callaghan, would you like to speak to the motion?
I can reserve my right to the end.
You certainly can.
Yes, thank you.
I'll let you reserve your right. Would any other questions? We have a question from Councillor Thurley. Sorry, my apologies, Councillor Edwards.
I was speaking for the motion. Well done.
Thank you.
Not a question. Yeah, just might, through you, Deputy Mayor, to the relevant member of staff, maybe to explain the amendments and why they were required to address some administrative changes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Finlayson.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Bowen. So throughout the process, we've received lots of great community feedback as well as the public exhibition period. We received some additional feedback following the draft revised version of the documents being included in part of the council meeting agenda, and have been working through with a couple of interested people in terms of how we could best describe the community feedback and the community's aspirations. Some parts of the changes are better reflective of what was previously recommended by Aubrey City Sustainability Advisory Committee, including both community and also Aubrey City's carbon emission targets in the community strategic plan, and also reflecting that how we can support and empower the community to achieve the community targets. I hope that addresses the question.
Would you like a follow-up question, Councillor Edwards?
No follow-up question, but yeah, just like to speak for the motion that I'm comfortable that this motion as amended incorporates the feedback from the Sustainability Advisory Committee, and also reintroduces the council carbon emissions targets to sit aside the community, which I think it's important to have both of them side by side, and just adds a bit of clarity to some of those measures and targets in Aubrey 2050 as well. So just some small administrative changes that I think make a big difference and illustrate the importance of all of this towards climate action.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards, speaking for the motion. Now a question, Councillor Glacken. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you to the most relevant member of staff, and I can't quite see the reference on the screen at the moment, but it was with reference to by 2025 using 100% renewable energy. So item 4.2, yes, is highlighted. Thank you. To the most relevant member of staff, noting the 100% renewable energy, two parts. Is that feasible, and what effect will that have on council? And what about the cost implications to council? Noting that one of the primary responsibilities as us as councillors is to ensure that our community gets best value for money. Can the staff answer that, please?
Mr. Ferris, thank you.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Bowen. Yeah, to answer Councillor Glacken's question, yes, it is feasible. And currently, council are exploring options with other councils around a contractual arrangement for renewable energy, 100% renewable energy. And once that's been progressed, we'll be able to bring the financial impacts, if any, back to council.
Thank you, Mr. Ferris. Any follow-up question to Councillor Glacken? No, thank you. Councillor Baker has a question.
Also on the same theme as a follow-up question, possibly to you, Mr. Ferris, what percentage are we currently using of renewable energy?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Bowen. Yeah, I'll need to take that on notice, Councillor Baker, and I'll be able to provide that to councillors tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Ferris. Any other questions? For or against? No. Happy to put the motion. My apologies. Or would you like to sum up? My apologies. Councillor Kellam, would you like to sum up your motion?
Thank you. Firstly, I'd like to thank the citizens of Aubrey for their feedback, which is invaluable. Community voice shapes the vision of the community's strategic plans towards Aubrey 2050. The overarching themes of growing a sustainable economy, enhanced natural environment, and a caring community, and a leading community will all lead to Aubrey being a significant regional city that is vibrant, diverse, innovative, and connected, which is inspired by its culture, environment, and location on the Murray River. I look forward to us all living and thriving in Aubrey with the shared vision of Aubrey 2050. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Callahan. Are you happy for me to put that motion out?
I am now happy.
Thank you so much. So we'll, for those for the motion. Thank you. The motion is carried. Item CM14, Officers' Reports for Noting. Item CM 14.1, 2021/22 Development Statistics, March quarter. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I move that Council receives and notes the information in the March Quarterly Development Statistics Report for 2021-2022.
And Councillor Edwards.
Happy to second the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Thurley?
I'd just like to ask a question of Mr. Christie. I note recently the Mayor of Federation had some comments about the New South Wales planning portal. I wonder, is that planning portal causing our planning people any problems?
Thank you, Mr. Christie.
Thank you for the question, and for you, Deputy Mayor Bowen. Like any technological change, there have been challenges incorporating. Some with the usability portal, some with the actual functionality of the portal with our own system. Council has made substantial investments, some with financial assistance from the New South Wales government, both in terms of technology but also resources to be able to accommodate the planning portal and the challenges from the planning portal through from that. So we believe we're on top of those challenges at the moment.
Thank you, Mr. Christie. Councillor Thurley, you happy for a follow-up? No. Any other questions online? Or no? Happy for me to put that motion. Thank you. So all those in favour? And that is carried. Thank you, councillors. Item CM15, Delegates' Reports for Noting. Item CM 15.1, there are nil. Item CM16, Notices of Urgent Business. I believe Councillor Thurley has some urgent business. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor King. On Sunday, a week ago, I attended the first public screening of the film Solstice, a great piece of work by the brilliant Helen Newman of No Bad Films. And I want now to pay tribute to my fellow councillor Stuart Baker and his family, Annette, Henry and Jack, who had the courage to share with the world this story of their daughter and sister Mary, who took her own life. This film and the advocacy of the Bakers is helping to break down the stigma of mental illness and suicide in particular. Some years ago, when I was Deputy Mayor, I opened an agricultural conference here in Aubrey, and one of the themes was the mental health of people in rural communities, particularly farmers who regularly face the stresses of drought, flood and fire while trying to earn a living. If you are mentally unwell and live in a city, no one has to know how you're feeling. But in a small community like Walla, Walbundry, Henty, Corryong, people will hear and see things and will talk. We need to remove the stigma and help our neighbours as we would do if they had cancer, for example. Suicide is probably something that has touched in some way the majority of people in this room. I remember 58 years ago, a fellow university student sat alone in a laboratory one night and drank a chemical solution that killed him. Sadly, no one spoke about it, and his death seemed to be of no consequence. So I bring this up tonight because next week is the winter solstice, the longest day of the year, the darkest day. And I want to encourage you all to go to the Solstice event next Tuesday. Show that you care about those who have lost their lives by suicide, and show your support for their friends and family, and send a message to our government that funding for mental health is urgently needed.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. Mayor King has a question of urgent matter. Hopefully this is very urgent.
Just quickly, I wanted to congratulate Deputy Mayor Councillor Bowen for being awarded the Order of Australia for service to our community in the Queen's Birthday Honours. I'm sure he's been overwhelmed with well wishes. I just wanted to also echo those well wishes and acknowledge his contribution to service for the Aubrey-Wodonga broader community. And yeah, he certainly has a passion for helping people and contributing. So congratulations and well done.
Thank you, Mayor King. I'm not sure whether that qualifies for urgent business, but much appreciated. Okay, we'll now move on to item CM17, confidential matters. There is no confidential matters at all. So that being the case, I'd like to thank all the councillors, especially those online. I appreciate your attendance today and all those who have come with us here, and also staff and people in the gallery. Thank you very much. I'd like to now, meeting closed at 7:11. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.